So this class was about the role of design in conflict and crisis, and we explored this question through a number of different ways. So the first was to look into the problems of the refugee camp itself and do research, both through the work of students who have been researching this refugee camp before us last fall, but also through secondary literature, anything we could find online, Facebook profiles of the camp itself, videos, films, and so on. Another approach was to look into design work and artwork done by other artists and designers on similar kinds of issues, where students were asked to research and look at these best practices in the field and comment on them. Third one was to do readings in sociology, international policy, humanitarian aid, to analyze these approaches. Fourth was to experiment on the campus itself, where I asked the students, how do you even make a connection to another culture? And here the students were asked to make videos about themselves with WhatsApp or with their cell phones, technologies that are accessible in the camp. And then, because we had translation issues with communities that only speak Arabic and we don't speak Arabic, another approach was to say, find an Arabic speaking student here on campus, and ask them to translate and introduce you for this other audience. So there were 2 videos done for this. This was for the first part in the semester, where we were really trying to get the grasp of the problems and also make a connection with the community. The second stage was to go and travel with the class to Jordan to meet the refugees, but also to get, before that, adjusted to the culture and get familiar with a completely different geographic, cultural, political, and climatic setting. That class trip took 1 week, and the students were asked to research a bit about Jordan, about that culture. Also, we visited the city, major landmarks in the region, and then gradually came closer to the camp, visiting first the surrounding areas, having a Skype conversation with the refugees, and then finally meeting in person in a workshop. The third phase was then to do post-production after the workshop in the camp, to visualize and produce some of the ideas that were introduced to us in the workshop by the refugees. They had ideas like henna garden, water filters and carts, mobile furniture and textiles, for example. So we tried to prototype these ideas with limitations of material and access as you would have them in the refugee camp. And the goal there is to go through the really activity of the making process, to teach the others about the problems and difficulties of access and life and lacks of humanitarian aid in the camp through this making process, without necessarily, pointing at people and objectifying them or victimizing them, but talking about these problems through the objects themselves. So this course was half about giving input about the role of design in conflict and crisis, and there the learning objective was given to students at the beginning of semester through our syllabus. At the same time, because we dealt with a completely unexpected and unknown context, a lot of it had to remain open-ended, and we were kind of changing as we were developing the course. So on the one hand, the learning objective of investigating what are the concerns, ethical concerns, cultural concerns, material limitations issues of access when working in areas of conflict and crisis, and what can design really do in art in these kinds of contexts. That's one learning objective that we could cover through research about the camp, but also learning about best practices. On the other hand, facing the actual location and the actual people was something that was unpredictable. So that part remained open, and also facing the type of participants in the course. It turned out that students in this course come from very different disciplines: architecture, art, mechanical engineering, material science, and so on. At MIT, students from many different disciplines can take our courses. So the course had to be adjusted also towards that. What was also very interesting and unexpected was the cultural background of students. So we had a couple of students from the Middle East who also spoke Arabic and are familiar with the cultures, and others who have never been outside of their home country. So the course had to calibrate itself towards these different backgrounds of students. So my role as a main teacher of the course was to frame the discussions, the themes, and also to moderate and kind of incite active participation. I was changing my hats depending on what kind of activities that we were doing. Sometimes when we were doing the discussions or brainstorming, I was the moderator. When we were doing design, I would jump and be part of the design groups and be, so to say, a team member to take the hat of one of the students. And in fact, I'm active participant still in one of the groups where I'm co-designing on an equal footing like the students are doing. So this is a very unique class in the sense of it has a number of different instructors. So beside me, I have a teaching assistant who is a graduate student in the arts. He is from the Middle East, so also someone who has the cultural knowledge, speaks Arabic, and also could bring this more poetic, critical dimension to the class. We had a co-instructor, Shari Abanat, who is a communication intensive co-instructor. At MIT, we have for our engineers this special module for learning about how to communicate. So certain classes will have additional co-instructors who are monitoring how students communicate, how do they present, how do they create the blogs, how do they create grant proposals, for example. So that was her role, and she had her own teaching assistant, Martin Elliott, who was doing the review of the blogs, feedback, and recording of presentations. Beside that, during our class trip, we had a fifth person involved who is a longtime collaborator of mine, Melina Filippu, who is an architect who did a thesis on refugee crisis in the Balkans and the Mediterranean route. So she applied her knowledge about these specific issues by helping us moderate the sessions and structure them in a kind of active workshopping way when we were in Jordan. So the first part of the semester was theory before the practice, first getting familiar with concepts of design and also the context. And then when we got into the camp and also the kind of design work we are doing right now, it's a flipped approach. The theory will come after the work is done. So it's the course begins with a kind of, it has two sections. So one theory before the practice, and the second part is theory after practice.